the title of the talk that I'm going to give today is called what?
Tools and rules, or tools, not rules?
Tools and rules, tools. So a tool is something you use to work on something, fix something, a device of some kind, you work on something else. And a rule is some kind of a structure or boundary or form or something that applies to a given situation that you need. A rule is like a fence. So, but intellectually or conceptually, it's some kind of a structure that allows you to navigate or work with something in a certain way. And quite often we get confused about how to use those, how to work with those. So when I say something is a tool, not a rule, I'm saying a rule is something that is kind of dead. And you say, well, this is how it's done. Don't do that. Don't cross over. Don't use your awareness, your intelligence, your imagination, for that matter, to see what this is, because everything is constantly in flux. And of course, some rules don't fluctuate much, but you always should bring as much awareness as possible to any given situation to see what it is fundamentally, and then you'll understand yourself, because you'll be there with it. You'll meet that where it is, and you'll know whether this is just something that you should follow the instructions to, or this is something that operates more like a tool, more like a way. Like, for instance, sitting meditation is not a rule or a bunch of forms that you just adhere to. I'm doing this, I'm sitting still, I'm doing this, and my expectations of what should happen isn't happening, so I must not be doing it right. Rather than seeing it like a tool, it's something that you sit down in order to see your mind clearly. It seems to be necessary to hold everything you can find that's moving, and hold it still without going to war with it. This means softly. You can do this with the body, generally speaking. You can sit, hold very still. And the training that's involved there is a process of repetition. And part of that repetition is saying, well, I'm doing this, and the next day I do this, the next day, and then 30 days, 50 days, 100 days, 3 years later, I'm still coming, I'm sitting down at the cushion, I'm holding still, I'm watching what's moving. It's a tool to actually bring that situation there. And just like the image I quite often use is a knife. If you just use your knife to cut things and chop things up, eventually, and you never sharpen it, then it's not going to do a very good job. Just an image, a way of talking about it. But if you sit, as we do here, you sit down and you just sharpen that tool. So it isn't so much about thinking about something or contemplating something, which you could do also. Sometimes I say, if a person wants to have some particular thing or topic or slogan they're trying to understand, I say, write it on an index card and put it in front of you, and spend a half an hour sitting there just looking at the wall, just watching what comes and goes, and then change gears and move over to another way of looking, and then just look at that slogan and look at the words in that slogan, look at the shape of the words. And if you wrote it, look at your handwriting. Bring as much awareness as you can to that. So that would be another tool, not something you have to adhere to. Tibetan Buddhism, the Vajrayana or Tantric Buddhism, is full of forms and forms. And when you practice all these forms, it's very common to feel completely unskillful. Because, if imagine if you're given a form by your teacher to visualize a little deity about this big in each one of the 7 chakras, all different colors. And then in the heart center of each deity, there is his or her mantra rotating clockwise around the heart center. And you have to see all of those. And it's the same time you're doing a mantra. You're saying the mantra, you're seeing it written, and it's not in English, of course, it's in Sanskrit or Tibetan, or polyglot. But that's a tool. It's a very sophisticated and complicated way of working with the mind that is discontinuous, is all over the place, and has innumerable parts to it. The mind is willing to break up into parts all the time. We witness it. You know, how many times in the last week have you said, well, a part of me wants to do this, but not part of me. So we're actually going along with that. We're actually using that as some kind of a justification for our confusion, or for our lack of ability to do what? Live up to some way that we think we should be. Well, I should know. I have all the information I need, but part of me wants to do this. And part of me wants to move to Brazil. Another part wants to, stay in the canal zone. So, we're doing that kind of thing all the time. We get confused about the tool. We get confused about the rule. So rules are like guidelines, but even those may change. They may fluctuate. They may open up. They may close down. And there's all kinds of levels that in our social, political, cultural level, there are rules made by. They even call politicians lawmakers. I've always thought that was completely hilarious. They're lawmakers. They just come in and say, where can we put down some fences and junk? So there's no, and this is only an observation. It's not really particularly a criticism, but there doesn't seem to be any attempt to help people understand their minds and work with their minds. There's just treating everyone like chickens. Make rules. Can't trust those chickens. Make rules. Put fences. Have certain. Don't feed them that. That's not going to work. Eggs won't be good. And of course, it's a silly image. Probably doesn't even work. But the point is to bring our minds to whatever we're looking at as a guideline or a rule that we're following, and also look at the practices that we do and see, actually begin to see the practice, whatever that practice may be. The one that is recommended here is shikantaza, and as far as the awareness practice, and then studying with a group of people. 10 hours a week, is it? We study in this temple as a group. Sometimes there's only 2 people studying. Sometimes there's a dozen. There's usually not that many, but sometimes there is if you count the people that call in on the phone and study. Another tool, and the tool operates in ways that are sometimes understood in some ways, and in other ways are misunderstood. A lot of times the preconception we have about studying is we should get more information and more knowledge and know more. And studying the Dharma starts out that way. There is the provisional teachings are very much about learning about the structure of the mind as it has been described by people down through the centuries that have spent most of their lives looking at it. So how you personally need to work with your mind, hundreds of years ago, you would come into a place like this, a meditation hall, center, Zendo temple, and you would get probably just one instruction. This is the way we do it. Everybody needs to conform and follow that rule and work with it that way. Then you might get some individual, and maybe even a lot of individual guidance from the person who was the teacher and from the Sangha, or the community of people that were participating there. But also, you would probably live there. You would probably be doing this all day long. It's a much different dynamic than we have now, where everybody goes to their job or goes wherever they go, and across town, or comes down from Minnesota for a few days, or from Wisconsin, from New York, and they're here 3 or 4 days, and they go back, and then they stay in touch by phone, either through study. It's just very complicated. And also something that's quite often left out is a lot of the times people, even though they're studying something like this in this particular way, they have all the rest of the things that are happening in their life. They have, they may have spent their life studying some particular, that might have a PhD. They might have a lot of training in some with this area or that. They may be And when we bring all of that together and simplify it by saying, okay, we're going to study the seven teachings of the 14th century Tibetan teacher Longchenpa. And you have to remember when he was teaching to a bunch of monks. I'm not saying other householder yogis or yoginis weren't studying that too, but probably not very many. And so he was teaching, and then we have a translation of it. We're coming together as a Sangha. And the tools that we have are how to study this and how to include everyone. When everybody's coming from completely different, we're not all a bunch of 18-year-old monks whose parents are trying to get them into the monastery to get rid of them or to train them or whatever, but we're coming from so many different directions. And so therefore, and Buddhism is coming, the meditation, this kind of spiritual path is coming from, coming from Japan, coming from Korea, coming from Tibet, coming from Thailand, Vietnam, all over the place, all different kinds of approaches. And so one of the things that I think is so important about our practice that is, again, often missed is when we are doing this study part is it's not only about the information that we're studying and whatever text that we're studying, but it's also coming together as a community, as Sangha. This is something that's missing. It's happening more and more on the internet. There's more and more of a community feeling there. This daily Dharma gathering we're going to do here at noon. There's a feeling of that, but what is missing there is, they're disembodied voices or texting or whatever, and so you don't actually get to sit and hang out with somebody. Any questions at this point? Yes.
Michael Reed is on the line here he's in Fort Wayne today. His question is sitting a tool or a rule or both?
Well, it's both. So the rule part of it is it's a form. So if you're trying to study this or practice this path, there needs to be a schedule. You're going to have to schedule it because it probably won't happen otherwise. So it needs to be actually getting to the cushion, sitting down and holding still with all your senses open. That's the rule. That's the way I teach it. And then from there on, it becomes a tool because what's arising in your mind is not or in your sixth sense fields is not what's arising in someone else's. So therefore, it might change, but that's why I'm here. So then if you talk to me about your practice, what's happening, then I am in a position to encourage you to keep going because I can understand how that's working for you. Or I might change the way that you practice. It doesn't change a lot, but usually just by saying that everyone is different, saying that there are adjustments, but it won't happen the first few weeks. It takes a while. It takes a lot of sitting for differences to show up in that way. Further question around that?
Not yet.
Okay. Questions here?
How do we know when to adhere to a rule or to use our intelligence to break out of that?
So I'm saying that if you want to study under this old man, then you should sit a lot. And that's a rule. Sit. If somebody comes back and says, well, I think I'm there. I think I don't need to sit anymore. I think I can probably handle this. I'm doing pretty good. I'm going to stop sitting. Depending on who that is, I might say, well, try that out. Stop for a month. Deliberately stop. So that might be a way to understand more clearly what the rule of the structure actually is. You might need to have a little hiatus there to find out what that really is, so that you give a chance for your opinions, ideas about it to drop, and so that you actually fall back into awareness of what's happening. More about that?
Sometimes you've talked about the letter of the law and the spirit of the law, but in our case, the forms, the letter of the form, the spirit of the form. And it seems it's really easy to fall into fundamentalism or a laissez-faire attitude, and just trying to see how to balance that middle line, walk that middle line.
Well, it's always with awareness. But it can be difficult. One of the things that perhaps some of you have run into, I know I have, perhaps you have, other people, is if you're really following the form a certain way, you're doing it a certain way, and somebody else comes along and they're not doing what you're doing. They're doing something a little bit different. Then you're looking at it and you're trying to understand, is this something that I should talk to them about? You know, now if the person comes in here nude and say, well, I just want to be exposed. You know, I just don't want to cover up anymore. This person's probably nuts. Unless it's me, in which case I get to do what I want. So what I'm saying is that it's better, unless you're really sure, it's better to keep your hands out, to keep your mind, keep your voice, keep your mind your own business, stay out of people's form, and let somebody experience the form. We've had one fellow who doesn't come anymore, would come in and sit down, and every day would come in and throw his car keys on the zabuton from about 3 feet in the air. He put everyone sitting, he would go ka-ching, ching, ching, ching. And if you were facing a wall over here, you knew exactly who that was. And quite often, if you're the Doan and you sit in the Doan seat, even though you can't see the entry to the Zendo, because people's body language is recognizable, especially if you're doing it over and over and over. This person here, and probably Senchu also, you know, can sit in that Doan seat, and if you're here a lot, you know who's coming through the door because they open the door with a certain amount of noise or lack thereof. It's pretty hard to open that door without some kind of noise. And if you're a practitioner, you should be there paying very close attention to anything you are expressing involuntarily. So anytime you're closing the door, if you're just coming in and you're halfway spaced out and you just come in and just click, click, you don't realize there are people sitting here that are hearing that sound. Not wrong. It's not something to correct. I don't think I've ever told anybody to not slam the door or not, you know, but you kind of get it. If you hear a lot, you notice that people can come in that door with you without making hardly a noise at all. And here again, is it a rule or a form? Or is it a rule or a tool? It's a tool. That door is actually a tool for you to work with. So you can realize that you never can do anything twice. You can't repeat anything. Repetition is way overrated. That's why you should do it a lot. That funny?
Yeah, that was nice.
And what you go ahead.
It seems like most of my life I've just been pretty much about not following rules.
Mhm.
But I don't know if that's a habit or what that is exactly, but it seems to disrupt what we're doing here for me. It makes it pretty difficult for me to come here and continue to do this all the time and repeating it all the time.
Mhm.
I don't.
What's your question? You've been coming here for what, 4 or 5 years?
Yeah,
Yeah, pretty regularly.
yeah. It could be more regular.
Huh? Yeah.
It could be more
Could
regular.
be. So what's the question? I'm hearing what you're saying.
How to get out of that? How to get out of that pattern of breaking the rules all the time?
Just continue to look at how you can't possibly do it right. One continuous mistake. We gave a talk on this, I don't know, either last week or last year. One continuous mistake. That's, unless you're a meditator, unless you're working with your awareness daily, that's never going to make any sense to you. People who have all their conceptual baggage and claptrap all hauled up in the attic of their mind think they know everything. They know because it's all right here. Think about it and analyze. But there's so much we don't know. Not knowing is powerful, powerful awareness. Because what is it? There's all this room for things to appear. I don't know. When you come up to your cushion, that's Suzuki Roshi talked about it 50 years ago, 45, 50 years ago. Beginner's mind, you know. So you're never going to get anywhere. It's not about this is a spiritual, a transcendent path. So it's not about self-improvement. If you want self-improvement, go see a therapist. go practice some other form of Buddhism. Not trying to say go away. I'm saying please do this. This is the kind of path that will actually take you very, very deep in, because there's very few maps. There's the only map is further. Sit down, go further, come back to this doorway, this openness into your mind. And this is the way you sit still, sit down, hold still, and watch what begins to move. And that's the journey that we all individually need to take. And the teaching person and the Sangha, or the community of people that are trying to understand or do the same thing, are those who will support you. They will support you and be kind to you, but they won't take your intelligence away from you, because they know you have to do it yourself. So if somebody's arguing with you about something, lose. Don't win arguments. Makes a person very nervous. If you're discussing something back and forth and they start to get the upper hand, and you don't have any hands, and they're not sure what it is that's missing, but they just notice that your body language is no longer something that they know how to attack. Yes.
What about concepts?
What about them?
Are they a rule or a tool?
Can be a concept. Give me an example of a concept that's a rule.
I would think the word form itself is a concept.
Okay.
And it seems to be loaded with.
So we have very strong forms. If you come in, if you've never been here before, you come in, it's like, what? What are these guys doing? So, and if you believe in forms or disbelieve in forms, then if you go for it or against it, if you do anything like that, then you're misunderstanding what the form is. The form is to be observed. And what we observe, the people who do this day in and day out, day after day after day, observe that they can't ever do the form. All you see is your own crazy personality every time you do the form. You do it. You see, you can't quite do it. Someone else's, their voice resonates with the doan, or the chant leader, a little better than yours. You realize that you're off, or you're going too fast, too slow, or else you start judging the doan. She should speed up, should slow down. That's too fast. That's too slow. Whereas somebody coming in here that doesn't want to prostrate. You notice we don't have a rule. You don't have to prostrate in here. If you went to Japan, you would, but not here. That's up to you to do that. It's just a form. There's nothing here to worship. This is only to remind you that somebody 2,500 years ago, if he hadn't appeared, this old man wouldn't be here and I wouldn't be talking. Yes.
How do the vows and precepts fit into that?
That's a very good question, Lisa. So the vows give you, if you're ready for that, that's why when you ask me for precepts or to receive jukai or ordination, I turn you down. I'm sure I turned you down.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but it's not like I don't want you to do it. I just want you to really be sure. I want you to come to the person that you have to receive these from and say, I think I'm kind of thinking, part of me wants to take the vow. Another part of me wants to, join the French Foreign Legion, and so, we're kind of at two minds. And if you're like, there's no way I will ever give you precepts. But if you come back, you're persistent. Yes, I've thought about it. It's something I really want to do. And especially if you're somebody who's been practicing for years, as you have, I would say, okay, if you're really sure, then it becomes your vow to observe. We observe vows, as Coben told me once so many years ago. We don't take precepts, we observe them. And so we do. We observe the way you can't ever not kill. You're always going to kill something. And we can't help but lie. Just anytime you open your mouth, you're lying. But it's not the conventional kind of deliberately saying, but you can't actually say what is true. Ultimate truth is the only thing that's true. Relative truth is full of holes. So to go back to your question, by seeing the way you can't quite see, you start to see the spaciousness of that situation. You bring your mind to that form. I take refuge in the Buddha as the example of someone who was sane. I take refuge in the Dharma as the truth that he pointed out. Everything is dependently arisen. And there's all kinds of other teachings that fall under that he talked about. And refuge in the Sangha, the community of people that will not buy my bullshit. And also won't go in and accuse you or correct you. They trust you enough to know that you need to realize what you're doing yourself. A very interesting kind of companionship. That's why in the Mahayana tradition, the teacher is called the Kalyana Mitra, or companion in the virtue. In other words, they're your companion. They're not your boss. That's more Tantric Buddhism, which is a little ways behind the Mahayana. I'm sure I'll get a lot of flack for that. No, it's just another tool, just other ways of working with the mind. Just a very powerful one. Michael, sent you.
Regarding the forms,
Yes.
what is the interaction that feels like a correction when you're learning the forms, or when you've been?
Like when I say to you, speed up.
Yeah.
It's not. It's just a direction. It isn't so much a correction. You know, I feel like you should be going faster. I'm just thinking of a particular time where you were the Don, you were leading the sutras, chanting, and it felt like it was too slow. But I listened to you do it an awful lot before I corrected you or redirected you or instructed you. So what's the question about it? You feel corrected? Then that's more about you than about anybody correcting you.
Yeah, it does feel like a correction.
Yeah. Well, it was. You were doing it wrong. And again, I can't necessarily manipulate I'm not like, nothing's ever wrong. Everything is perfect. We're not talking about operating out of some kind of Pollyanna or idealistic. It can be that, but it doesn't last. You see something, you say, don't do that. Stop doing that. Stop. Like I could have said to the gentleman who dropped his keys, and I probably would have at some point said that, but it doesn't help to point something out or, lowercase c, correct somebody unless they're ready to receive that as help or information. And there are situations where certain things happen and people react, or they have their preconceptions, and the ideas, they're not really willing to turn over their body, mind, their self as a student to actually, they don't trust you. They won't even give you the benefit of the doubt. They're always someone that just they don't want any help. They want help, but they want to tell you what kind of help they need. So they'll tell you, this is the kind of help. Again, it's not wrong. It's you're working with that person and their karma and their causes and conditions as best you can, and you actually see if you have permission or not to help that person. So if you're here, you receive Jukai as you have, then you've already given me permission to correct you. If you want to use that term, if that's how you felt, then that's fine. You can feel corrected, but you can handle that. I mean, you can go ahead. So you're doing this, and we don't, everyone has, you function as the chant leader, a Chiezan does, and he's the person who teaches everybody usually. Kozan does, Onyo does, and other people are learning I think Chunzan's learning that. Different people are, usually people who have received precepts, but not limited to that. We could teach anybody that they wanted to learn it, and they could participate in that way. And so, but it's just a matter of, if you do it, you don't really know what it is until you do it a whole lot and realize you can't really repeat it. And it goes nowhere. It's a machine that doesn't go anywhere. And if it does go somewhere, then it'll be back.
We have time for one more question.
Michael.
So you have these forms you can't do completely correctly or even repeat.
Mhm.
And you have these rules or laws.
Mhm.
Does that mean that these rules and laws aren't really real?
Well, the matter of real and unreal is, the create a rule. It's like the law of gravity. The law of gravity works until you get into outer space. And then it works, but it works in a different way out there. Then you end up, falling on something else. Something, magnetizes you. So I'm not sure if I understand the question as far as being real and unreal. It seems like it's jumping into another area altogether. Things are both real and unreal. That's why it's so difficult to understand them. This sound is real. It's gone. But the sound that can you remember that sound?
No. No need
I'll give it
attempt.
to you. Now listen. Now remember it. You remember it?
It's in the past.
I'm like, can you remember it? I know it's in the past. Can
There
you remember?
is-
Can you remember the future?
No.
How do you know the difference? But maybe you're remembering the future all the time.
No.
Don't argue with
Just
me.
this moment.
I'm up here. You can't argue with me. Please go ahead. What is it? What's the basic question? And then we need to stop and go to.
When we use the word rule
Yes.
or law,
Yes.
it implies that this is something that is real. And that's at least what we're told.
Okay.
That a law or
Like the word dharma.
or like the word dharma.
Dharma means
Yes.
things are dependently arisen. That's the Buddha's dharma. The Buddha discovered that law about the nature of the world.
But when we practice,
Yes.
we can never do it correctly or even repeat it.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, doesn't that make all of these rules not real?
Yes and no.
Yes.
It would have to be. It have to be yes and no. Because anytime you posit this, you just empower the other things called warfare. But if you don't do anything with it, then it's just what it is. Like it says back here, as it is. Shall we stop?
Dedicate to Mary.
Dedicate to Mary. Thank you.
In the back of your chant books is the dedication of merit. Also, our donation box is in the hall. And PayPal online.
May awareness penetrate into all places so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Ji-ho Sam Chi Chi-son Bu-san Ho-ko-san Moku-ja-oro-mi. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita,